Um, I'm not going to speak very long now, except to say that last week we introduced the concept of intention into meditation. So there's awareness, but there's also intention, and intention greatly enhances meditation because intention is deep within ourselves. And I think you know that as we've gone through this, I've tried to distinguish between the false self, kind of, let's call it the messed up part of us, or religion's got lots of names for that, the sinful nature, whatever. But it's that unconscious part of you. And then there's your true self. And your true self is part of God. Your true self is your awareness, which is more than just the word awareness. It's this loving, peaceful, joyful, living place. And it's a place of you, the more time you spend there, that you realize you're not this solo individual making your way through life that's tough. You're connected to other people. You're connected to God. And it's just a beautiful way to live and a beautiful place to be. But your intention is part of that space. And of course, your intention can be set in the wrong direction, and you can spend your life chasing things, as most of humanity does, things that aren't going to make you happy. As we say, looking for love in the wrong places, looking for affirmation from people, security, money, the idea that if I have more control, then I'll be happy. And so sometimes our intention is set in that direction, but meditation's this powerful opportunity to set our intention back towards the source, to say, no, I intend to God, meaning I intend to this true self part of me, this life, this peace, this joy that's unconcerned by what happens in my life. And more than that, we did a little survey last week on how we all feel about God. And in general, most people were quite positive. So I would have needed more time for this teaching if I sensed that some of us are genuinely angry with or fearful of God. And there's probably some shadows of that in each of us. But it seems that most of this group has got a sense that if they were to get more of God, as it were, that it would be a good thing. And so therefore, intention is, if you point your intention that way, you're going to get it. But that rests on, I guess, a belief that God will respond. So in the Bible, it says, who of you fathers, if your son asks you for bread, will give him a stone? Or if your son asks you for a fish, will give him a snake? In other words, rhetorical question. You're never going to do that to your child. And then Jesus says, how much more will God, your heavenly Father, not give good things to those who ask? And so there is this premise that if you turn your intention towards God, you're going to get good stuff. So I shared that video with you. And the video covers Jesus's first teaching on prayer. There's this law, this principle in spiritual writings and manuscripts that often the first mention, the first teaching, the first and the last words are usually the most important. So the first time Jesus talks about something, or the last time he talks about something, it has an extra weight of meaning. And so Jesus, first time he talks about prayer, he says those three things that I shared in the video. He says, go into your inner room, meaning they didn't have inner rooms. I've got a nice study here. They didn't have that in those days, meaning go into your inner world. Close the door, meaning when you're going to have this prayer time, do what I've encouraged you to do, which is take those 3 deep breaths, blow out, let go. Just try to let go. I just got a disappointing email before the call it's still lingering in me. This like little bit of, I'm just going to close the door, let it go. And then that beautiful thing, pray to your Father who is in secret. In other words, God's not out there on billboards. God's in this deeper world of consciousness and of the Spirit, but very real so. And then it says that, and God who sees what is done in secret will reward you openly. And reward is probably the wrong translation word there. The idea is what I've just said, is God is good. And if you seek God, you get good stuff. So, that's really it. But now, centering prayer. This is it. We're going to do centering prayer. We actually kind of did it last week. So all centering prayer is meditation with an intention towards God. Or with an intention, more specifically, with an intention to surrender. Often the greatest growth in our lives comes when we give something up. So life, God puts us into squeezes. So we're under pressure and we feel that pressure and it causes us to have unhappiness. And then we realize, it's a choice to give up of this thing. Like, I'll give you an example. I'm in this dreadful, this is hypothetical. I'm in this dreadful fight with somebody who's trying to take my money. And it's really causing me great anxiety. Why? Well, because deep down, if that money gets taken, man, it's like the carpet gets taken out from under my feet. Like, what would happen if I didn't have that money? And so surrender in that case is not giving up, hey, you win, buddy, take my money. It's not that. It's accepting in your heart that if you were to lose, you'd still have everything, which is God. And funnily enough, there's 1,000 different things. Often the surrender is needing to forgive someone. That neighbor insulted me. I'm grinding in my head. They say unforgiveness is like keeping a person in the cage of your heart, like a bird. Every now and again, you open the cage, take them out, beat them, and then put them back in the cage, That's what resentment and unforgiveness is like. And it's terrible. You just have to let go. You have to surrender. And that suffering that brings turns up the temperature, because what God is saying, don't you just want to let that go? So really the greatest spiritual muscle is the letting go muscle, is the surrender muscle. But you're actually training that muscle during meditation. So as you do this prayer, you'll see that the thoughts that come are often thoughts linked to something you need to let go. And so you're then saying, I consent, I surrender. Yes, God. You're actually answering your deepest need, which is let go of that thing. So let's say a couple of years back, I had some really stressful personality conflict. And every time I started into meditation, it would just, like, the thought that would plague my mind is how those other guys are wrong and how I'm so right. And why are they such idiots? And then you catch yourself and you realize, by letting go of that thought, I'm kind of letting go of them. I'm surrendering the situation by agreeing that I don't want to think about it. Because the mind is so compulsive. When you're holding on to something, it's synonymous with your mind wanting to go over and over it, right? And so when you say, okay, you know what, I just don't want to think about this, I want to let go of that thought, you exercising that powerful, powerful spiritual action that ultimately causes inner transformation. And it's the action of forgiveness, forgiving a person, forgiving a thought, forgiving yourself, letting go of this, letting go of that, letting go of that. And that's really what Jesus meant when he said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. What he's really saying, Someone who's poor in spirit is just someone who's let go of stuff. Doesn't mean they're poor actually. They might have money in their bank account, but they're not possessing, they're not clinging to stuff. In their spirits, they're poor. But what have they got? The kingdom of heaven. They've got the presence of God. They've got this awareness, this sweet place of consciousness, this connection with God and other people. And so they're the happiest people on earth. But in their hearts, they possess not a property, not a bank account, meaning if it was taken from them, it would be fine. And if somebody insulted their reputation, who cares? Because they're not clinging to any of those things. Anyway, so I've been puzzling over how to guide you now. And so let me just explain. Centering prayer is you choose a sacred word. Hopefully you caught that already in the video, but if you didn't, you need a one word. So like Rebecca and Drew have been doing this for years, you guys have got a word. I found it almost impossible to change my word. So just bear in mind, whatever word you choose now will probably stay with you for life because it becomes so ingrained that like I've tried to change my word. My word is presence. Your word might be love. Choose any word that's got a good meaning. In other words, don't choose the word hell or anger, you know, something nice. But it's not the meaning of the word itself. That word is just shorthand, code for the following prayer, which is, God, I consent to your presence and your action within me. Or put differently, yes, God. Or put differently, I surrender. But, you know, it's good to remember the actual words of what that prayer is. Your prayer is, God, I surrender. God, I consent to your presence and your action. But when I say presence, or you might say Father or joy, that sacred word means that prayer. And so what you're going to do is you're going to start like we usually start. I will guide us a bit. You kind of close the door, you breathe off, you become aware of your body. And then you set your intention by saying that word in your heart. Presence, in my case. And so now my intention is set on God. And then I just hold it there. I hold my intention there. And then when I notice that my intentions become weak and fuzzy, or I got distracted by a thought, I use the word again to bring myself back. But if I'm holding it there, then I don't have to, it's not a mantra. It's not like presence, presence. There's all meditation techniques where folks are just saying the same word again every 5 seconds. That's not what we're doing here. You're only saying it when you have to renew your intention. So that's centering prayer, but it's profound. And like I say, I've been struggling with how I'm going to guide you. I know how I'm going to start the usual way, but I'll probably just remind you to check in. Just renew your intention. And I'll see if I have anything else useful to say. So there could be that we spend a lot of the time in silence, if that's okay. So does that make sense? I will go and get my timer, and then we will begin. So, I mean, any questions on that? Obviously, we're going to do this now for several weeks and go much deeper into it. But, like, does that make, like, you know how to do centering prayer now?
I had a quick question.
Yeah, of course.
So, generally, the way I do my meditation is I'll start with the deep breaths, and then I'll go to focusing on my breath, and then I'll go to the watching my thoughts. Is where I'm trying to always get to, is watching my thoughts. And if I find that I'm skipping, kind of getting a little backtracked on watching my thoughts, I'll go back to watching my breath till I can get back to watching my thoughts. Now, my question to you is, if we're going to focus on centering prayer, if we find ourselves getting away from it, should we go to those other techniques to get back to centering prayer? Or do we just stick with centering prayer and that's it?
Well, I want to suggest to you, just like I did with each of the techniques, that at least practice this method in its pure form for several weeks. Because unless you do that, if you just kind of do a taste test for 5 minutes, oh no, it's tough, I'm just going to go to observing my thoughts, you'll never discover whether this is awesome for you. So with that said, the pure form of centering prayer, Thomas Keating actually says it's not a prayer of attention, it's a prayer of intention, which is actually why it's so difficult. It's if you just begin meditation with centering prayer, like you haven't learned that the breath and all of this, it's like you're cold and like you don't even know always what is intention. So the way I play it back to you is to say, try to just use intention to center yourself, not attention. Although we're going to start with a bit of attention.
Right.
But in the long run, for me, this has become a blur. My daily practice is a blur of 3: attention, intention, and attitude. And we'll get to that last one some other day. But it becomes a blur of techniques. But all I'm saying is this one, intention is really powerful. I believe it's a lot more powerful than just attention. And so I encourage you to try and use it. What I'd say is if you practice this and on Saturday morning, you're really struggling, like your mind is all over the place, you just can't settle down, then maybe a few minutes of watching your thoughts. I find watching my thoughts is a great way to get my mind to settle down. Other times, watching my breath or whatever. So, sorry if I'm being too long-winded. I'm trying to say, ultimately, a lifelong practice is pulling together whatever you need at the time to have a good experience that day. But for now, try and really give this the pure practice that it deserves. It's like, let's just work biceps. Let's get those biceps strong in this.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Here we go. So just breathe off your cares and let's just begin with either body awareness or breath awareness to quieten ourselves and find that center of presence. Maybe you need to do 10 breaths or a higher number of breaths just to focus in. maybe you've done it already, but you're going to say your sacred word in your heart as a prayer to God, aligning your intention to consent to God's presence and God's action. But here's a few pointers, practical pointers. Whenever you use your sacred word, do it very deliberately and slowly so that you kind of very conscious of what you're doing, and yet at the same time gently. So it's like laying a feather gently on a piece of cotton wool, very gently but deliberately and slowly. And holding your intention is also a very gentle thing. It's not a iron-fisted, just a very subtle movement of the inner person. When we were doing the different awareness techniques, I always directed you to try and feel that inner body, that feeling of presence or sense of silence, that deep center within you. And if you are able to experience that, and it's perfectly fine if you're not, but if you are, then what this prayer is knowing that that's God's presence, which is also your presence. And it's like your intention is just to hold on to that, just to stay connected with that. But if that doesn't resonate with you, then again, the sacred word, just holding that intention towards God, that's what you're doing. once you've set your intention, just be content to rest and to be. You're not pushing a button that suddenly is like a spiritual escalator or something. Don't expect fireworks. Learn just to be in that place of gentle alignment towards God and to be, to sit in awareness with that intention. If you get distracted in a major way, in a way that just pulls you out, just gently come back to your sacred word, slowly, deliberately, but gently. And realize that coming back process is surrender. That is exercising the spiritual muscle. So it's almost like a great opportunity. If you did get distracted, it's not failure. It's an opportunity to enjoy a reconnection with God. And you're going to do that 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times if you pursue this path. And that's 1,000,000 responses to God, 1,000,000 turnings towards God. And each one is precious. Each one is transformative. But do them gently, slowly, and with joy, because they're powerful. They're the purpose of this prayer. In this form of meditation, gentleness and slowness is particularly important. Just gently strengthen your intention towards God. got very little time left. As you secure in your intention, be aware. Just pick up your awareness, not of breath or anything, but of your intention and of everything else. Just be as aware as you can while holding your intention. As we end, the ending of centering prayer, just like the other methods, which is try to hold on to what you've gained, to come out of it slowly. It's almost like you're taking the stillness, the intention with you as you re-engage. Okay. All right. Well, I think we've got a whole lot of new centering prayer people here. How did it go? And what do you think? John, if you're talking, I think you are, but you're on mute, so. There you are.
All right. Yeah, this is exactly what I need right now. Just surrender to the situation and not get too upset about anything.
Surrender is amazing. I just wish somebody had taught me this before I was 52 years old or 53. Like things that happen to us in life, when you resist them, you whatever it is, even if it's a bad situation, you just on a losing battle. Whereas if you accept them and then try to do your best, if they're negative, it unlocks incredible spiritual energy. Firstly, within you to cope, but actually even in the material thing. I mean, that's the essence of like the.
Would you relate that to some kind of divine direction, or how would you look at that as surrendering versus pursuing something?
Well, there's a lot one can say about that, but the first answer is absolutely yes, because of divine intervention, but not in an arbitrary way. Like a lot of people's idea of God is that God's a bit like a slot machine, you know? Like God's just there, and then if you put in the right coin and you pull the wheel, like you might hit the jackpot. It's more just because the laws of the universe are that we one with God and each other spiritually, and the things that happen to us in this life are secondary reality. They're less true than the first thing I said, that we connected with God. And so then a tree falls on your roof, and that's not cool. But our messed up minds can take that situation and totally blow it out of proportion. Now, John's a psychologically stable person, but I mean, what happened to John's house could be the straw that breaks the camel's back for some people. I mean, I'm giving you an extreme here, right? Somebody who's in a huge stress situation, maybe lots of relational conflict, highly strung, overthinks everything, worries about everything, and then the tree falls on their roof. I mean, that could just send them into, breakdown. That's an extreme. But why would that happen? That's because that person's mind and their whole conditioning is so disconnected from what's really true, which is that they're part of God, they're floating in this river of God, that God's looking out for them, and that everything that there's a way to be happy even if there's a tree on your roof. And so when you surrender to the situation and you just accept it instead of fighting it, you like align yourself with reality. And not only do you make yourself happy and far better able to handle it internally, which sounds like just psychology, like a psychological trick, but there's a genuine spiritual element to it where you're almost like facing the same direction as God. And instead of swimming upstream, you've now got the whole current behind you, and good things just start happening, and people come and help you, and the insurance doesn't give you a hard time or whatever. But now, I'm not suggesting the ultimate goal of all of this is to have easier lives. but there is, it's hard to put it in words, but the short answer is yes. By doing this and surrendering, you're aligning yourself brilliantly with ultimate reality.
Yeah, and I've had pastors in my past really get to me on forgiveness, which I'll tell the story some other time, but there's a story of a lady whose child was murdered and she ended up forgiving the murderer and adopted him as a son. That's a pretty extreme example. I could tell it in a more eloquent way than that, but to sum it up for time's sake, but I mean, you become you become what you pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And forgiveness. So when you don't forgive something, you're keeping them in your attention, and you start becoming, the bad thing that you can't let go, and it grows in power until you let it go and forgive it. But what you're really doing when you're forgiving is you're turning your attention to something else good by releasing the attention you have on something that's bad. So that's how I at least tie back to the centering prayer is, it's more focused on the forgiveness is turning the turn of your attention to something else. And then this is what you turn it to. And without the forgiveness, you can't turn your attention towards something good. So.
Brilliant, Clay. Well put. So let me remind you of this thing I posted on the group about sometime in March. You become like a deep lake. The outer situation of your life and whatever happens there is the surface of the lake, sometimes calm, sometimes windy and rough, according to the cycles and seasons. Deep down, however, the lake is always undisturbed. You are the whole lake, not just the surface, and you are in touch with your own depth, which remains absolutely still. You don't resist change by mentally clinging to any situation. Your inner peace does not depend on it. You abide in being, unchanging, timeless, deathless, and you are no longer dependent for fulfillment or happiness on the outer world of constantly fluctuating forms. You can enjoy them, play with them, create new forms, appreciate the beauty of it all, but there will be no need to attach yourself to any of it. And then just to touch on Clay's point, there's another great quote. I don't know if I sent it to this group. This is more when you have people conflict, like when you don't resist. The way resistance happens with conflict is reaction, right? So like somebody cuts you off in the traffic and you start swearing and hooting. And I'm saying that particularly because like that's one of my great weaknesses. But it says non-reaction to the ego in others is one of the most effective ways, not only to going beyond ego in yourself, but also of dissolving the collective human ego. Non-reaction is not weakness, but strength. Another word for non-reaction is forgiveness. To forgive is to overlook, or rather to look through. You look through the ego of another person to the sanity that is in every human being as his or her essence. Anyway, we'll talk about it all a lot more. Any other comments or questions?
No, I think I'm good.
Sweet. Great, guys. Well, bless you, man. Nice to be with you today. Clay, I'll give you a call.
Okay, cool.
Hey, Drew.
Thank you, Rob.
Are you available in half an hour? Because I'm going to have a call with Steve Newberry. He wants to catch up. And if you're available,
Awesome.
I can pull you in.
That would be great.
All right, sweet.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, bro. Bye.
Awaken, my soul, come awake to haunt